This has to be one of the most extreme examples of cupping I've ever seen. Is he crazy, or is there actually some legitimacy to this? Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and on this channel we talk about sports from a different medical perspective. So if you learned something here, be sure and comment down below with what it was and subscribe to the channel. Jarvis Landry shared this picture the other day on his Instagram account showing this basically whole body cupping that he had performed after one of the practices at training camp. I'm pretty used to seeing cupping in sports, especially on the upper back, but I don't know if I've ever seen an athlete with it all over the backs of their lower legs as well. So definitely taking this to an extreme level. This is an example of dry cupping where these little domes are placed on the skin. And in this case, it looks like there's a suction device where the air is basically suctioned out. That creates negative pressure, which pulls the skin up into that suction cup. Another way of applying these is, of course, with heat, where when that air heats up inside the cup, that creates that negative pressure to again pull the skin upwards. To understand if this is crazy or legitimate, let's just start off with a brief overview of how cupping theoretically works. Within the field of more traditional or alternative medicine, there's this idea that a lot of aches and pains and problems with the body are attributed to these buildups of toxins. If we look at a cross-section here of the anatomy of our skin, you can see that starting at the top, we have this layer that we call the epidermis. And then beneath the epidermis, there's a lot of these small little blood vessels, sort of like capillaries, that help to transport blood and nutrients to the skin and help with things like heat dissipation and regulating our temperature. So the main idea with cupping is that whenever you have pain, you have this buildup of toxins sort of in the skin here. And by creating that suctioning effect, you're basically helping the body to clear the toxins out of the skin. Within these layers, there's something called the lymphatic system, which helps to sort of drain and clear all this stuff out from the body. Another proposed mechanism with cupping relates to its effect on the fascia. So the fascia is this connective tissue-like band that wraps around the muscles, and some people attribute muscle pain, muscle stiffness to problems or tightness with that fascia. With cupping, by basically suctioning and pulling up the skin, you're trying to help relieve some of that tension on the fascia and improve, some of those mechanics and movement of the fascia relative to the muscle to, again, hopefully relieve pain, symptoms, stiffness, etc. We all remember seeing Michael Phelps at the Olympics with these circle cupping marks all over his skin, and basically that redness that we see with those cupping marks is blood products. You can sort of think of it like a bruise underneath the skin, except there was no direct trauma or impact that caused the tearing of those capillaries. It was just that suction effect that causes all this blood to pool and accumulate here from those blood vessels and capillaries being damaged underneath the skin. And there's some thought that basically how dark that circle is corresponds to how many toxins you had in that area and how healthy your blood flow is. Athletes are typically using cupping to help with recovery from their training and to improve things like pain in the muscles. So presumably here with Landry, he's got pain just diffusely throughout his body, which would make me first of all concerned if there's something else going on to cause such widespread pain in both his back and his legs. I'll say too, kind of the pattern of the cups on here looks a little bit haphazard. For example, on his left side, we have just kind of 4 cups applied around the gastrocnemius muscle, but over here we kind of have this row going down the middle. So I don't know if there's specific rationale for that or if it's just what cup sizes are available. You know, this one right here is sitting in the popliteal fossa where there's really not even any muscle beneath that area. So I'm not really sure what the specific technique is here for choosing all these locations, because to me it looks a little bit haphazard. But nonetheless, presumably Landry is doing this to help with his recovery from practice. So that takes us into the research and the question of if there's any actual legitimacy to this type of treatment. Well, first of all, it's hard to do research studies on these different modalities because it's hard to do randomization. It's hard to blind people to the therapy. And so there really aren't that many high-level, high-quality, evidence-based studies to look and see, does cupping actually remove any toxins from the body? And so my general approach with a lot of these types of modality treatments is to first of all just look and see what the potential harm is for something like this. In the hands of somebody who's not trained, this can be very disastrous, especially if the cups that are heated are used, potentially leaving very severe burn marks on the skin. But generally speaking, in the hands of somebody who's trained and a professional, this should be a pretty safe technique. We do have some more musculoskeletal research out there on the effects of cupping. This was a paper published in 2021 that measured the stiffness of muscle, specifically the triceps muscle, using a technique called ultrasound elastography after cupping had been performed. And they found that it actually did reduce the stiffness of the deeper layer of the muscle after cupping. So there was some effect on the muscle. Now, people will interpret that reduction in stiffness to mean maybe you have more flexibility. It's hard to know exactly how that translates to something like sport performance or recovery, but it is good to see that there was at least some measurable effect on the tissue as a result of these external cups. This was just a case report where they actually performed an MRI scan with the cup applied to see whether or not there was any measurable change within the muscle layer. So here we're looking at sort of a cross section. We call this like a sagittal view through the shoulder. We can see a little bit of the outline of the shoulder blade right here, kind of this Y shape. And then this muscle up top is going to be a combination of the trapezius and one of the rotator cuff muscles called the supraspinatus. So this top picture is without the cup, and then the bottom one is with the cup applied. So you can see pretty clear changes in the muscle deep to the skin. One of my biggest questions with these external modalities is always how it actually affects the tissue deeper. You know, things like foam rolling, percussion massage, cupping. How does it actually affect the muscle down below? And at least in this example, we saw that there was some position change, at least, on the muscle down below. Now, what this is doing to the muscle is something that they didn't measure in the study, but interesting nonetheless to see that some of that suction effect does actually translate down through the skin and into the muscle. And finally, this study looked at hamstring flexibility, comparing cupping to just traditional self-myofascial release with something like a foam roller, and found that both methods actually improve flexibility, but patients tended to prefer the myofascial release with the cupping, just thinking that it felt like it had more benefit for them. So there is some evidence out there to support the use of cupping, specifically with the musculoskeletal effects on the muscle, as opposed to true evidence about this ability to clear toxins out of the blood. I'm a little bit more skeptical about that, but bottom line with these things for me, even if it's just a placebo effect where people feel better, if it's not overly expensive, if the risks are low, and there is some benefit from it, whether it's perceived or real, then by all means, go for it. If anything, you'll get some pretty cool pictures to post on your social media account. So that's it for the video, everybody. Let me know as always any questions or comments down below. I'm curious, I've never actually tried cupping, so I'd love to hear from you if you've done it, how it made you feel, what any residual effects were. So let me know down in the comments, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.